welcome to EHA Unplugged, the official podcast channel of the European Hematology Association, EHA.
Hello, I am Isabel Olivera, a medical writer for EHA. In this series, we are exploring the world of hematology through conversations with leading experts in the field. Today, we are thrilled to have Professor Kirsten Grønbæk, a hematologist and researcher from Copenhagen, Denmark. She currently holds the position of full professor of hematology at the University of Copenhagen. She serves as a consultant hematologist at Riks Hospital, and she leads her own research group on translational hematology. Welcome, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
Professor, can you tell us first what drew you to hematology?
Yeah, that's an interesting story because when I graduated, it was very hard to get a job in Denmark as a doctor. So one of my friends passed by the Department of Oncology, actually. And I got a 3-month locum there. But during the night shifts, we were also looking after the hematological patients. So that's how I got into hematology, because I thought it was much more interesting than oncology. So I got a job up there with the hematologists, and I very quickly got a lot of responsibility. And what they actually let me work with was really inspiring, and it was a very great environment, good ambience, nice people. So that meant a lot to me.
So at the time you were working as a medical doctor, but you're also a researcher.
Not at that time. When I was a student, it was very hard to get into any kind of research. I studied in a smaller hospital in Denmark, and there was not a big transition for students to do research. So it was only when I got interested in hematology I realized I also wanted to go in dig more deep into that. And I started out doing some epidemiology and had to read a lot of patient files. It wasn't the most inspiring type of for me at least, research. So after I'd been reading 2,400 patient files, they actually told me that I didn't have the right talent for research. I think it was a good incitement actually to do something else. This was a time where there were not so many opportunities for young doctors to learn more about hematology. There were some courses actually, and it was when I first joined the Hammersmith course. I met hematologists from the other end of the country, and they say, well, why don't you come and work with us? So that was a good move for me. Our pathologist was quite a famous pathologist at the time, lymphoma pathologist. So she said, well, why don't you come and work with me? She got me a scholarship for doing research. And she quickly sent me to the Danish Cancer Society that has their own research labs. And I was supposed to be there 1 month, and I stayed there 7 years. So this is a fantastic environment. Then it was already becoming translational, because I was, on the one side, I had the pathology, and on the other side, I had the basic scientist at the Danish Cancer Society. So this was already then bridging between the clinics and the basic science, which is what I have been doing the whole time, and what I really think made it much more interesting for me. Hematology, and particularly at that time, was one of the few, I think, specialties where you really got into also looking at the cells and all this. And I just from the start, when I started to study, I actually wanted to do cell biology. So we had a first common year, and then I sat next to one of my very best friends now, and she was going to do medicine, so I ended up in medicine. So this was for me the way to combine everything I was always interested in. So that was actually very nice.
And do you still now treat patients?
I do both. I have a clinical professorship, right? So in order to do that, you need to be a clinician also, and I really enjoy that. I probably see patients 1.5 days per week, and that is mainly patients with MDS, which I'm mainly working with now, and also hereditary bone marrow failures, which I think is a really interesting field as well, and I'm getting more and more into that.
In hematology, you can work in so many things. You mentioned that you work on MDS. So how did you get into this? Why this subject?
I actually did my thesis in lymphoma, as I said, in the Cancer Society, and I think lymphoma are really interesting. So on the research side, I have actually continuously been working with lymphoma. But then after you specialize very late in Denmark. And after I specialized, this was at the time where azacitidine became, used. And I went to an epigenetics meeting in Puerto Rico after my first ASH meeting about epigenetics. And that was really very exciting and an eye-opener for me. I actually mostly went there because it was Puerto Rico, to be honest. But I got very much engaged in epigenetics, and we're lucky to meet people that are really now very famous in epigenetics. I think they now call them the great grandfathers of epigenetics. So I'm still working with them in the Stand Up to Cancer Epigenetics Dream Team, Peter Jones and Steve Bailey, and this was really good for me to get into. I feel that it's very exciting because that was when we first figured out that epigenetics was so important in cancer. So that's sort of my way into MDS, because we then started with azacitidine, and then there was a position in that part of the department, a permanent position. So this is sort of why I left lymphoma a little bit in the clinics and moved to MDS. I think this is the most interesting subject you can take because there's still so much we don't know about MDS. There's still so much to learn. I mean, with a lot of the other diseases, there's so many good drugs that work very well. With MDS, we're still there. I mean, we could transplant, yes, then we can cure. But if we don't transplant, we don't have so much to offer, unfortunately. There are new drugs coming up, and we can make lives better. We can extend lives maybe. Cure is far away still unless you transplant. So it is a challenging disease. And I think we now, over the last 10 years, have got to know much more about the biology also, which I find very interesting. This is a way forward, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
And why is epigenetics important in
general?
in MDS?
That's a good question, because we don't know why azacitidine works still after all these years. But azacitidine, which is a hypomethylating agent, was the first drug to ever show a survival benefit in high-risk MDS. So this is sort of how that came in. I did my thesis, and then it was discovered, of course, the relationship between the epigenetic regulators to 2-DNMT3A and XXL1 and the changes both in DNA methylation and chromatin modifications. And I think since these mutations are so abundant in MDS, of course, this is also the epigenetic changes are huge, and we have been working with that a lot in the lab 10 years ago. It was discovered that this starts at a very, very early time point, long before people get sick, probably, with clone hematopoiesis. And one of the things that we did in our lab was to look at those individuals who had these mutations, it's chip mutations, and actually otherwise do not have changes in blood cells or other kinds of hematological disease, they already at that stage have certain epigenetic changes if they have TET2 mutations at the enhancers. So meaning that is probably what drives the disease towards a myeloid malignancy. And I think, so yes, epigenetics certainly is very important for this disease, but I think it's important for many other diseases, as is genetics, and it's all interlinked. And I think that whole discovery has been done while I've been around. So, I mean, I didn't do it on destiny, but we were all thinking that, in the beginning, we all think there must be some genetics behind these epigenetic changes, and there were.
So that's what you're working now on, is the genetic basis of this epigenetic changes in MDS? Yes.
Well, I'll be working on both things. I mean, it's because it's all interlinked. You can't look at, I think you can't really look at one thing without looking at the other. It's all, also with the abilities we have. Remember when I was doing my thesis, it took a year to analyze the gene. We were doing what was called GGG gels. So you did do all these gels, you could change them 3 times a day, and it was a huge amount of work. And nowadays, you put it into a machine and you send it somewhere and somebody else analyzes or get the data. So nowadays, the most important thing is actually how to handle the data, because it's very automatic. And of course, I think we all understand that now that one thing does not exist without the other. It's you have to look at the whole picture.
So you talked about clonal hematopoiesis. Can you say briefly what this is and what you have been lately?
I can say I'm actually interested in this before we knew it existed, because because I came from the lymphoma field, and then went to MDS, and we had quite a few patients where we could see they had both diseases, not necessarily one occurring after treatment of the other, but occurring at the same time, indicating that there must be a common background. So we were really speculating a lot about that back in 2009-10, I think, and then it was discovered, of course, that some of these mutations in stem cells occur at a very late, early time point. And of course, if you have a mutation in a very early stem cell that gives this cell a growth advantage, and it differentiates, you can actually probably sometimes go in both directions. So this was the way I started thinking about this. Now we know that most genes are associated with in clonal hematopoiesis are associated with development of myeloid diseases. On the other hand, that if you have structural aberrations, if you have that in certain areas, it's more common to develop lymphoid diseases. So this whole background, of where things come from, I think has been super exciting, and this is why we have digged into that, and I think because we were already thinking of it before somebody else figured it out, we quickly went into the field and also had material both from lymphoma and myeloid disease, and could look, for example, like clonal hematopoiesis in lymphoid cancers. For me, for somebody with a split brain, where you on the one side had the lymphoma background and now went into the myeloid field, I think it was a very very, very interesting subject for me to look further
To understand the common origin.
Yeah.
In some cases.
Yeah, in some cases, yeah, and but also how these things may be influencing each other. So it's so you do have a higher risk of lymphoid disease if you have clonal hematopoiesis, for example.
When you have clonal hematopoiesis at the beginning, you don't know it.
No,
And the doctor doesn't know it because it's not something that gives you.
no, but it's very common. Yeah.
It's there, but it gives you a predisposition to develop cancer. But nobody will detect it because you will not go look for it. So how do you work on something like that? Because you have to find the people who have it and trace their history.
This is a big discussion point because there are these people that have hereditary predisposition to cancer. This is a different story. So this occurs during lifetime. Actually, if we use very sensitive methods, these clones can be detected in almost all of us. But after the age of 60, it becomes very common, and there's an arbitrary limit of you have to have a 2% variant allele frequency in order to call it clonal hematopoiesis. But after the age of 60, it's around 10%, and then it increases by age, so you get more and more of these clones. But you can walk around happily with these clones, and it has been shown that it's associated to quite a lot of different diseases. But the risk of developing a hematological cancer is less than 1% per year. So it's not that, at least for the moment, that we do population screening to say this and that person have this predisposition, or what you could say, because I mean the risk is also that we make a lot of healthy individuals sick, and as long as we do not have anything to offer for them, I think we should let people be happy with their mutation.
Yeah, the right not to know.
Yeah, the right
to live
to know.
happy. Yes.
But of course, there are some signs that now there is a risk of this getting more in the direction of a myeloid cancer, for example. And this is when they become cytopenic. So if they have anemia, and particularly if they have anemia and one additional cytopenia, and then the mutations, then they are on the road to develop myeloid cancer, and that's the condition we call clonal cytopenia of undetermined significance, which is much more likely than CHIP to end up being a myeloid cancer. But there are now prediction tools so that you can actually plot in the mutation that you find in this patient and other things, and then biochemically, the chemistry, etc. And then you can predict whether this person is going to develop myeloid cancer. But I don't think we are at a stage where we should do that at a population level.
Let's change gears a bit. What can you tell us about your involvement with EHA? So first, what's your first memory of EHA?
My very first memory of EHA is the very first EHA meeting where I had a poster. It was a research I did in that smaller hospital, I think. And then I was certainly traveling with the company because otherwise I had no money to go to EHA.
Yes.
So it was a different time for me, but it was a great experience to be at well, it was a relatively small congress at the time actually, but for me it was very exciting to hear all this science and meet all these people. Well, it wasn't so, I was quite shy.
And how did this evolve? How did you become actively involved in EHA?
Took a long time actually. So as I said, at that time there was nothing called Lightning the Flame. There was nothing like Young EHA. I did actually know people that were very much involved in EHA, but I wasn't a big name at the time. I was not really getting involved or not asked to be involved in a way, or there wasn't opportunities as there is now, I think, for also people on their way in their careers. And I think that's something we've been very good at changing in EHA. So you actually had to be a big name almost to be into EHA in the beginning. And this is absolutely not like that now. I think everybody can contribute in some way, and this is also how you get on in EHA. So it was only when I applied to become a professor, so it was quite late in my life, the late David Grimwade, who was here very much involved in EHA, was evaluating my professorship. So he called back and said, we need this girl, she needs to go into the SPC, the Scientific Program Committee. So this was my way in. There was a great opportunity. First of all, I liked the work there. I really liked the people a lot in the committee. We had a lot of fun, and you got to see a lot of different kinds of research. And I was, who am I to evaluate this? But then you have all the conversation with the other members, that are in your part of the evaluation committee, and I think I learned such a lot from that. And I met, I think what have made me stay so close to ESA is the staff at the offices. I mean, we had such a lot of fun always, and I think that make it. I mean, I'm not only fun but also extremely good support. And I think that communication, that you feel you're part of a community, I think that was all family. That was really important for me.
And so how has this impacted your career?
I think it has impacted me in the way that I got a much larger network of people. I mean, it's a way to get to know people working not only in your own field actually, but also in other fields. And I think that's important because you get different kinds of input. That research environments are different, and you can learn from each other. I think that's important. I was 4 years in the SPC, as you should, and then rotated off. And then somebody, I don't know who, suggested me to the board. And then I got elected. I was very surprised, actually. So I remember I asked Elizabeth McIntyre, because I knew her from the SPC. So Elizabeth, what are we actually doing here? So, and then little by little I got into it, and I really enjoyed the work. So yeah, everything I've been doing is by chance. There's not a lot of it that has been planned. And I think I always say I'm the happy number 2, and I actually think I am. There was this joke about the Danes, they were the happiest people in the world, and that was because they had so low expectations. I'm not sure that's correct, because of course we have high expectations, but I think in a way, this has been important to sort of, not set too high goals, because then you're deemed to fail. But we also have something that's not so good in Denmark called the jantelov, meaning you shouldn't think you are somebody, and that sometimes take over too much.
So looking back at all of these, what have been the most rewarding moments of your career so far?
Oh, the most rewarding, it's probably not a moment, it's a process, I would say. But for me, the most rewarding thing is to have students and see them grow. I have been so lucky. It's all about picking the right people to your lab. And then I think what I experienced at the Danish Cancer Society was this very vibrant environment where you didn't want to go home, because it was nice to work with the other people. And so you just work late at night. And I've been working, I think for me to see the group working together, functioning and supporting, and the students supporting each other and supporting each other's career. And the most rewarding thing for me is to see them, be successful.
So what advice would you give a young medical doctor that is now considering which specialty to go into?
Of course, as you go into hematology, that's clear. It's the most exciting specialty, I think. And then I think also I think they need to make up their minds if they want to do research. I feel now it's a little bit different with the generation we have now. I think they have a different way of looking at the work-life balance, and definitely if you go into research, forget about the 7 hours a day work, 5 days a week. It's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
And if you like that lifestyle, go for it.
Yeah.
But you have to consider where you really want to invest your time. For me, it's been super rewarding. I think it's been, I didn't expect anything like this at all. So it's just been a big journey, a great journey, and I think I would recommend anybody with the interest to do it, but don't expect it to be. I mean, it's also a hard job.
Yeah,
it's a fun but a hard job.
Thank you very much, Professor Grønbæk, for sharing your life with us and for your expertise and all your experiences. And to all of you for tuning in to EHA Unplugged. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and see you in our next episode.